So start us off today, we have Will playing Anikthea. This is an Enchantress graveyard-centric deck where he's trying to put enchantments in his graveyard and uses Commander's ability and the fact that she's making token creatures to abuse that and flood the board with 3/3 Menace enchantment creature tokens. Next, we have David playing Ulalek. This is a spaghetti monster deck, but he has access to all 5 colors. So with this deck, he can ramp and he can remove pretty much anything that gets in his way. With his commander, he's trying to use the ability to double his big spaghetti monsters while they're on the stack, as well as their cast trigger. I'm playing the new Ghired from the Cowboy set. The way this deck works is, first, make a token. Second, make a copy of that token over and over again. So I'm trying to make tokens out of things that you shouldn't be able to make tokens out of, and then clone them ad nas until I can flood the board with a bunch of value. Cliff is playing Alela, Artful Provocateur. He's got to focus on vehicles, which just so happen to be artifacts. So whenever he casts any of his vehicles, his commander gives him a 2/1 body to help crew it. He's also included a good amount of the artifact payoffs we all know and love. So that's going to do it for what everybody's playing today. Let's go ahead and get into the gameplay. Will starts by playing Undergrowth Stadium, then he casts Burgeoning and pass the turn. David plays the Darkheart Wastes, triggering Will's Burgeoning. Will puts and Dr. Trial into play, and David passes the turn. I play Temple of Garden, tapped, triggering Burgeoning. Will puts Yavimaya Cradle of Growth into play, and I pass. Cliff plays Razortide Bridge, tapped, again, Burgeoning. Will puts Verdant Catacombs into play, and Cliff moves to his instep. Will responds by cracking the Verdant Catacombs. He fetches 4 Shadowy Backstreet. He surveils Aura of Silence into his graveyard and starts his turn. He plays a Swamp. Then he casts Parallel Lives and pass. David plays Tectonic Edge and pass to me. I'll play Sunpetal Growth. Then I cast Nature's Lore. I search for a Jetmare's Garden into play, tapped and pass. Cliff plays a Command Tower. Then he casts Talisman of Dominance and pass the turn. Will casts his commander, Anikthea, Hand of Erebos. When she enters, he exiles Aura of Silence, making a 3/3 zombie copy of it. Because of Parallel Lives, he'll get 2 and pass the turn. David plays Eldrazi Temple, then passes to me. I'll play Wooded Bastion. Then I cast my commander, Ghired, Mirror of the Wilds. He turns my creatures into Kiki-Jikis, but only for tokens that entered this turn. I'll pass from there. Cliff plays Urza's Tower. Then he casts Shram Senior Edificer, letting him draw whenever he casts auras, equipments, and vehicles. After that, he'll pass the turn. Will casts Composer of Spring. For Constellation, he can put lands into play from his hand, but if he has 6 or more enchantments, he can put lands and creatures into play. Then he'll cast Sanctum Weaver, triggering the Composer. He puts Yenna Red Tooth Regent into play, letting him copy enchantments for 2 mana and a tap. Moving to combat, he sends his commander at me for 4 damage, with 1 3/3 Aura of Silence going at David and 1 going at Cliff with no blocks, and he'll pass the turn. David starts by basic cycling an Ash Barrens, getting a swamp and putting it into play. Then he passes to me. I'll play a forest, then I cast Seedborn Muse and pass the turn. I untap my lands thanks to Seedborn Muse. Cliff plays Urza's Power Plant, and with artifacts and enchantments costing 4 more to cast, he'll pass the turn. Will plays a forest, then he casts Archon of Sun's Grace, giving him Pegasus tokens when enchantments enters. From there, he taps Yenna, making 2 non-legendary copies of his commander, thanks to Parallel Lives. These 2 enchantments trigger the Archon, so he'll get 4 2/2 flying Pegasus tokens with lifelink. Moving to combat, he sends his commander at Cliff, unblocked for 4 damage and pass the turn. David plays Path of Ancestry, then he casts his commander, Ulalek Fused Atrocity, which lets him copy his spells and abilities for an additional 2 colorless mana. He'll pass it to me from there. I start my turn by playing a Command Tower. Then I cast Furbolg Flutist. When it enters, I gain control of target creature until end of turn. It gains haste and myriad until end of turn. I target Will's Sanctum Weaver with the ability. Will responds by sacrificing his Aura of Silence to destroy his own Sanctum Weaver. I'll pass the turn from there, untapping my permanents. Cliff plays a swamp. Then he casts Darksteel Ingot for a staggering 5 mana, passing to Will after that. Will plays City of Brass. Then he activates Yenna's ability to make 2 more Aura of Silences. Archon of Sun's Grace triggers, and he gets 4 more Pegasus tokens. Moving to combat, he sends 4 2/2 Pegasi at me, unblocked. His 3 Aniktheas goes to Cliff, and his 3/4 Archon goes over to David. Anikthea triggers on attack, exiling Sanctum Weaver and putting a 3/3 token copy of it into play. He'll remember to double that later. He gets another 4 Pegasus tokens and his life goes to 48 from lifelink. He'll pass the turn from there. David casts Oblivion Sower, choosing Will to exile his top 4 cards. Will exiles a Lush Portico, which David gets to put into play. When it enters, he surveils 1, leaving it on top, and passes to me. I'll play Reflecting Pool, then I cast Mirage Phalanx. It soul bonds to a creature, giving both creatures at the beginning of combat on your turn, create a token that's a copy of this creature except it has haste and loses soul bond. Also, Mirage Phalanx makes me exile it at the end of combat. I choose to soul bond it to Furbolg Flutist and I move to combat. I make a token Mirage Phalanx and Furbolg Flutist. When the token Flutist enters, I choose to take control of Will's Yenna. From there, I tap Garrett and Seaborn Muse, making 2 copies of Furbolg Flutist. When they enter, I target 2 of Will's Aura of Silences to steal them. He sacrifices 1 Aura of Silence to destroy the other in response. I send Will's Yenna at David so it dies in combat. Then I send the Furbolg and Phalanx tokens at Will. He blocks all 4 creatures with 4 Pegasus tokens. The Pegasus tokens die and Will gains 8 life. I exile my tokens at the end of combat and pass the turn. Cliff plays a Prey Stream tapped, and I remember to untap my board thanks to Seaborn Muse. From there, Cliff plays Mech Titan Core, drawing a card from Shram. Then he'll pass the turn over to Will. Will casts Satyr Enchanter. Then he moves to combat, sending 19 lifelinking damage in the air at me, unblocked. He sends the 3 Aniktheas at Cliff for 12 unblocked damage, and he gains 16 life. He'll pass the turn from there. David plays Sulphurous Springs. Then he casts Sire of Stagnation. Whenever his opponents play lands, they have to exile their top 2 cards, and he gets to draw 2 cards. He'll pass to me from there. I'll cast Vaultborn Tyrant. When it or another creature with power 4 or greater enters, I gain 3 life and draw a card. I move to combat, making a Furbolg Flutist token. Then I tap 3 creatures to make 3 more Flutists. That triggers Vaultborn Tyrant to draw 4 cards and gain 12 life. With my first Flutist, I target Aura of Silence. Will sacrifices it to destroy his own parallel lives. With the second one, I target Will's Archon of Sun's Grace. Then I remember to also get a copy of Mirage Phalanx, gaining 4 life and drawing another card. With my next 2 Flutist triggers, I'll take 2 of Will's Pegasus tokens. I send everything at Will. Because of Myriad, Cliff and David will have a 3/2 Archon and 2 2/2 Pegasus tokens coming at them. Will takes all 27 damage and I gain 21 life. My tokens are exiled at the end of combat. During my second main phase, I play Rootbound Crag, triggering David's Sire of Stagnation. I exile my top 2 cards and David draws 2 cards. Then I play Land of War Elves and pass, with Will getting his creatures back. Cliff casts Night Scythe. When it enters, he gets a 2/2 Necron, and he draws a card from SRAM. Then he plays a Swamp, triggering Sire of Stagnation. He exiles 2 cards, David draws 2 cards. Finally, being able to cast artifacts without the upsell, Cliff casts Solemn Simulacrum. When it enters, he gets an island into play. David draws another 2 cards, and Cliff exiles his top 2 and pass the turn. Will plays Temple Garden tapped. David draws another 2 cards, and Will exiles his top 2. He moves to combat and sends 1 Anikthea along with his Archon and 8 Pegasus tokens over my way. When his Anikthea trigger goes on the stack, I cast Generous Gift, targeting his Archon of Sun's Grace. Will gets a 3/3 Elephant. Then with Anikthea, he gets a 3/3 Parallel Lives from his graveyard. I take the 20 damage sent my way, and Will passes it over to David. David starts by playing a Wastes as his land. Then he casts Hideous Taskmaster. When he casts it, he gains control of up to 1 target creature that each opponent controls. He untaps them and they gain Trample, Haste, and Annihilator 1 until end of turn. He pays 2 colorless using his commander's ability to copy the spell and the cast trigger. With the ability, he takes my commander, Garrett, Mirror of the Wilds, and my Furbolg Flutist. From Will, he takes his Parallel Lives. He also takes Will's commander, Anikthea, Hand of Erebos. From Cliff, he takes Sad Robot and Shram, Senior Artificer. He moves to combat and sends Hideous Taskmaster, my commander, and the Flutist at me. Parallel Lives, Anikthea, and Sad Robot goes at Will, with Shram going at Cliff. Will sacrifices Burgeoning, the Composer, and a land. I sacrifice 3 lands. Cliff sacrifices his token after crewing the Mech Titan Core. I'll block Furbolg Flutist with my Vaultborn Tyrant and take 10 damage. Cliff blocks Shram with Mech Titan Core. Will takes all 9 damage. After that, David moves to his end step and we all get our surviving permanents. I'll start my turn by playing Minas Tirith. I exile my top 2. David draws 2. Then I cast Atali Primal Conqueror, choosing to soul bond it with Mirage Phalanx. On ETB, we all flip until we hit non-lands. I cast Will's 3 Blind Mice, I'll cast David's Talisman of Impulse, and I'll cast Cliff's Unwinding Clock. Then I cast my Beast Within, targeting Will's Parallel Lives. Vaultborn Tyrant has me gaining 3 and drawing a card. Then I move to combat, making a copy of Atali. When its Enters trigger goes on the stack, I tap 4 creatures to make 4 more copies of Atali. I gain 15 life and draw 5 cards. Then we flip until we hit non-lands 5 times. I should note that I shouldn't have the original Atali anymore, because the only way this works is if I choose to keep the legendary copy token that just entered, since that's the one I'm going to be copying. With all those Atali triggers, I'll cast David's Farewell, choosing to exile all artifacts, enchantments, and graveyards. Then I cast Will's Doomwake Giant, giving all my opponent's creatures -1/-1. I also cast Will's Eidolon Blossoms. Doomwake is a 4/4, so I draw and gain a life from Vaultborn. Then I draw from Eidolon of Blossoms entering. That's my second enchantment, so creatures are getting -2/-2. Then I'll cast Will's Tribute to the World Tree. I draw from Eidolon and creatures get -3/-3. Then I cast Will's Aura Shards, drawing again, giving -4/-4. Then I'll cast David's Eldrazi Displacer. Of my own cards, I'll cast Nexus of Becoming. Then I cast Outcaster Trailblazer. I'll also cast my Soul Ring into casting Roxanne Starfall Savant. I'll gain 3 life and draw from the Outcaster entering with Vaultborn's trigger. I do the same from Roxanne entering. Then I'll cast Fanatic Aronis as my last card from my Atali triggers. When Roxanne enters, I get a Meteorite token and deal 2 damage to Cliff when it enters, taking Cliff out of the game. From there, I remember that I have Will's Tribute to the World Tree. I draw a card from Eldrazi Displacer. Then I draw from Outcaster Trailblazer. Fanatic Aronis gets 3 counters. I'll draw from Roxanne, and I think that's all my triggers. Still being in combat, I send Atali at Will. Will takes the damage, and I pass the turn. Will plays Fetid Heath, triggering David's Sire of Stagnation. He exiles 2 cards, and David draws 2 cards. Will passes from there. David starts by playing a land. Then he casts Ancient Stirrings. He reveals Kozilek's Command. Then he moves to his end step. During his end step, I use Eldrazi Displacer to blank Atali so that it's no longer soulbound. Again, I shouldn't have this Atali. It should be exiled because it's a token created with my other creature, but it doesn't matter. After that, I cast Terror of the Peaks, pairing it with the Phalanx. From there, I can make just over 10 copies of Terror of the Peaks, having them all see each other, so the table concedes because I have more than enough damage to close out the game. Hope you all enjoyed the game. Don't forget to hit the buttons down below just so I know you're watching, and until next time, I'll see you at the table.